right, we are back. Another episode, Pioneers and Builders in Jacksonville, Florida, or as we like to call it, PB and Jacks. Very excited for this episode. We're going to be covering a nonprofit here in town called Arc Jacksonville. I got Kari Bates. I got Lacey Rumberger. Kari is the CEO of Arc Jacksonville, and Lacey is the VP of Advancement. Ladies, thank you both for being here and giving me your time today.
Thanks for having us. It's been fun listening to your podcast for the last few months, and we appreciate the opportunity to talk about the Arc Jacksonville, which we both love dearly.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I'm glad you're here too. And we've spoke before this, and you kind of gave me some really good dialogue around what Arc Jacksonville does, which we're going to get into. And then the other thing that I was really excited about, which we're going to get into as well, is the amount of partnerships you have across the city and how much reach this actually has. So PB and Jacks really exists to spotlight and amplify a lot of good work. And I think you guys are doing amazing work. So I'd love to dive in. Let's talk about if anybody's listening has no idea, never heard the name Arc Jacksonville before. What is Arc Jacksonville? What's the mission? What's the purpose? And why are we in existence?
Sure. So great question. And sometimes the answer changes based on who's asking because what people relate to, obviously. But essentially, the Arc Jacksonville is about empowering people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. We tend to now favor language like intellectual and developmental differences, but we are talking about people who have generally a disability they were born with or maybe ended up with slightly shortly after birth. When we really talk about empowering, we're talking about everything from independent living support, residential support, work support, social programs, advocacy. And really at the core, we just believe in the dignity and the potential of every person, regardless of their ability.
Okay. That's wonderful. So you mentioned residential support, and this might be a really good place to start. So somebody's born with an intellectual disability. I'm sure that they have caregivers for the bulk of their life. I'm sure most people do. Some people probably do not. And regardless, there's probably going to be a stage of life in which the caregiver can no longer give care. Is that kind of what ties into the residential portion of this, is where somebody has an opportunity to call a place home and also have services provided to them to help them live a functional living?
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's twofold. There are times, obviously, just like all of us, that we want to move out of our parents' house and we want to kind of go to that next step in life. People that, have relationships and maybe they want to get married and they want to work and they just want that independence, but they might need a little bit of support. So in that case, the caregiver might still be able to take care of them, but they just want to keep growing and maturing and have the same opportunities that most people have. And then there's other cases, because we serve such a wide variety of people, there are cases certainly where someone needs a lot more support for different reasons. That could include, assistance with medications. It could include more personal care type things. It could include supervision for mental health related reasons. It could be any number of things. And in that case, we do see generally when the caregiver is unable to continue to provide care. And that's evolved over time. I mean, we're about to celebrate our 60th anniversary. But if you think about when individuals with intellectual and developmental differences were born, prior to when we were founded in the 60s, they generally would end up in an institution. And that's what great families were told was the best thing to do. So when the ARC was founded, it started as just something for people to do during the day. But as we've looked at how do we kind of raise the bar on what people with disabilities are offered, what they have access to, we've then adapted our services. So it went from, in the 70s and 80s, group homes that were really focused on getting people out of institutions to now the Village, which is much more focused on, okay, how do we give someone just an opportunity to live independently and just to pursue their dreams with kind of the necessary but less invasive supports than maybe other settings. So it's kind of evolved over time. And a lot of that, the potential of the people we support, it's not that their potential's evolved, but the opportunities they've been given through education and things are constantly changing. So that's even in the last decade and 20 years, we've seen a lot of evolution. And that kind of guides, I guess, where our programs go.
Okay. Thank you for that. I absolutely want to dive into the programs, the offerings, and the evolution throughout this episode. You touched on something. This is your 60th coming up on 60th anniversary. How important is that to you guys, and how are you guys celebrating that?
We're really proud of it. I think the really cool thing about the Arc Jacksonville is that we were founded by a group of families. And to this day, I would say that's a driving force in what we do. And that remains kind of the heart of what we do, even though the world and the system we're living in have both changed so significantly. The heart of parents and advocates just looking for more and how can we do it better. One of our taglines is what's next? How do we answer the what's next for someone? So, we want people to get jobs, yes, but now, we've just started a new partnership with Florida State College at Jacksonville. So now how do we actually get people certifications so that they are obtaining more specific training to pursue more of a career than just a job? So, I mean, there's that piece of it. But I think if you go back and think about the 60 years, it's pretty incredible to think that a group of families came together. And at that time, they just wanted social opportunities and something for their child to do during the day because they weren't even in school at that point. They did not have the right to education they have today. So it started there, and then it's just evolved. And the system has gotten increasingly complex. We're very heavily tied into the Medicaid system now because of some legislative changes that happened in the 80s. So it's now, in some ways it mimics a healthcare model, which is different, but how we've evolved and adapted and continued to, even in recent years, realized as people's lives are changing, as life expectancy is changing, what do we need to offer that still gets at what started us 60 years ago? And that's parents that just want the best for their child.
And I think when we talk about pioneers, which I know is what, your podcast is really focused on, I think our 60th anniversary is such a great opportunity to really honor the pioneers that came in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. And they were really an uncharted territory because, like Kari was saying, the institutions were closing and that was the status quo before. And so it really opened up a world of possibilities for day programs and education and college programs. And so the Arc Jacksonville was at the forefront of all of that. In the 80s and 90s, we were the first group in Jacksonville that was promoting employment for people with intellectual and developmental differences. Our college program that launched in 2006 was the first of its kind in the Southeast United States. The Village in 2016 was the first of its kind in the nation. The Lodge just last year was the first of its kind. And so throughout our history, we have a legacy of being the first and being at the forefront of emerging needs for people with intellectual and developmental differences. And as we've gone through and kind of planned our anniversary celebrations, I've learned so much about the people who stepped up when there wasn't all of these offerings and services. So it's just really amazing to be a part of that legacy of innovation and change.
Yeah, I would be very excited about it too. I think that's great. And just hearing all the different things and how you guys approach it in 2025 versus how I'm sure the pioneers had to deal with it in the 1960s and 1970s and the taboo surrounding it is incredible. I guess my first question about the 60th anniversary, as you're celebrating these pioneers, what is the celebration going to look like? How are you guys going to ring in the big six?
So it's kind of multifaceted. I'll share a little bit and then Lacey can kind of build on it. We're doing one specific kind of reception for our longtime supporters, people who have been with us for a long time and really have supported us both in connections and obviously in fundraising efforts as we've rolled out programs who've been really instrumental in helping us get started, whatever vision we had. And then we're going to be doing kind of a series of things through the decades, featuring some of the work Lacey mentioned and how we've evolved through the decades. And then we'll be standing up some fundraising efforts around that too, where we're going to be especially targeting monthly giving, and we're going to be targeting $60 a month, a certain number of people to really help us kind of pursue our next vision. Lacey, I don't know if you want to chime in.
It's really exciting because we have a group of people that have joined a committee around our 60th anniversary, and all of them have been involved for about 30 years or more with the organization. So half of our organization's life, that's some volunteers, board members, staff members, people who really were around as the Arc Jacksonville was growing into what it is today. So we're going to give the opportunity for all of them to share stories. So on our website, we'll be posting stories from each of those individuals of memories or events that they remember over the past 30 years. So we're really excited to hear from them and to hear, just some of the things that happened throughout our history that we might not think about every day today, but really turned the Arc Jacksonville into what it is today. And of course, we'll be celebrating a lot at our annual event, Dinner with Bill and Friends, in November. That'll be a great celebration with a lot of the people who have also been around for many years. And so just a lot of celebrating and kind of looking back on all of the things that got us to where we are.
It's a little unique too that Lacey touched on. We serve individuals for decades oftentimes. I mean, we might even meet a family. We have a family support team, and we might meet a family shortly after a child's born, or if they need help as they're starting the school system and figuring out IEPs and Medicaid and Social Security and all that, we might meet them and we could serve them. I mean, we have people in our group homes that we have essentially grown up with them, and they, came in their young 20s and now they're aging adults. And we've certainly had to adapt programs to that. But I think that's kind of a unique thing about what we do, is that we are generally, there is no, end to needing some level of support. It might be very technical. How do I renew my Social Security and my Medicaid? But it could be more intensive. And it's fun. Or we were actually looking at, when we talked about our 60th, which clients have been with us the longest. And there's a lot that have been with us a really long time. And that's, I think it's unique to what we do, just a lifetime of service for most people.
Yeah, great point. I guess, and we're going to dive into some of the services here in a second. Some of these aren't like a doctor's appointment where you go in and you get some help and then you're good. This is long-term care and long-term ability to help somebody through an array of things. We're talking about education. We're talking about living. There's some other things that we're going to get into here in a second. It's an easy thing to look back on and say, okay, yeah, it makes sense that you guys are working with these people for decades. But as you put it into like actual color, you start to realize the impact of it. So no, this is fantastic. 60 years. I'm really excited to help you guys get the word out and help you guys throw an amazing party. I would love to talk about the services though, because we're doing a lot of work. You touched on three things. Lacey, I'll start with you. The college program in 2016, the village in 2016. So we'll go on 2016. What is the college program and what is the village?
So our college program that launched it was 2006, actually. So we're coming up on 20 years of that program. That's our on-campus transition program, and that's located at the University of North Florida. And that program is really an immersive college experience. And for young adults who are transitioning out of the public school system, we wanted to give them the opportunity to get that experience like their peers, like their siblings, like everyone around them is getting that opportunity to go to college and have that experience. So the students in that program, they live on campus at UNF. They audit classes and attend classes with all of the other students, and they're able to join activities, clubs. They're constantly on the go. Our staff really gives them the ability to connect with the greater UNF community. So they're going to basketball games, they're going to volleyball games, they're doing all the things that a typical student would do. They're able to participate in graduation. And so we've heard from so many parents and families that program is so meaningful because oftentimes they have siblings and they're able to experience those things at the same time that their siblings are. Their parents are getting to watch them have all of these experiences and walk across the stage at graduation. And so it's a really meaningful, beautiful program, but it also provides them with a lot of independent living skills because they're living away from home in a dorm room. They're learning about cooking and budgeting and grocery shopping and transportation. How do I get around? How do I plan my day? All of those things that we all kind of learn during the college experience. And we have a wide variety of wraparound supports. So they're also learning social and emotional skills. They're learning how to communicate. Like I said, they're auditing classes, so they're getting that academic component as well. And then a huge piece is the work readiness component. So we're working with students to figure out what they want their future career to look like and getting them on a path to achieve that. So for some of them, it looks like internships, on-the-job training experiences. We're helping with resume building. And then after graduation, the Arc Jacksonville is still there to support them. So we can help to place them in a job. We can provide ongoing coaching and hopefully loop them into some of our other services and supports for a successful transition. So like I said, we're coming up on 20 years of that program. When it launched back in 2006, it was the first of its kind in the region. And we've now seen a lot of similar programs come online, which we're really excited about because it really just promotes that sense of belonging for those students that they can have an experience just like their peers and just like everyone else. And then flashing forward 10 years, that's when we opened the Arc Jacksonville Village, which I can let Kari share a little.
The Arc Village, it really is. I don't know sometimes that people know how fortunate we are in Jacksonville. And I said, whenever I first came to the Arc Jacksonville, it's almost like a tourist destination for people across the country. Probably at least once a month, someone reaches out and was like, can I come visit? I live in Ohio. I live wherever. It's an independent living community that serves 121 people who have intellectual and developmental differences. Everyone has their own apartment. If you went into it, it feels just like any other maybe nicer apartment than many of us have lived in. And The majority of people live alone. They're mostly one bedrooms. We do have about a third of the units are 2 bedrooms. So people who want to have a roommate, or we have a couple married couples that live there. So they live with their spouse there. We have a few people who drive. The majority of people work there. So if you pulled in, you'd just think, oh, this is a really nice apartment community. You wouldn't know. What's really unique about it is the affordability piece. I have not found anywhere in the country that's as affordable as it is for the amount of wraparound services that are available, also on top of obviously just the setting and what you're getting, kind of bang for your buck. So it's very unique. We have an extensive waiting list. We're certainly always happy to help other organizations start these types of properties, because there is almost an endless need, obviously, for affordable housing, and that translates very much to our population and the need for affordable housing. So we ourselves are looking at how do we expand. We get around 20 interest applicants a month, and we have very little turnover. So those just build and build, over time. But the number of places coming online across the state, across the country, are certainly increasing, and we just want to further that, because there's not enough of the housing. I think the really cool thing about it is it was and is really an innovative model because of how it allows people to live. I mean, it is a maximizing independent setting. In theory, if someone wanted to go to Walmart at 2 a.m., they can walk out and go to Walmart at 2 a.m. It is just like an apartment, but there is staff there during the day. There are overnight staff there. If there's an emergency, everyone has a call button, a way to call them. So it could be something like a toilet's overflowing. And just like many of us, if we first move out, we don't know how to deal with that necessarily. But I don't need to be in a group home because I don't know how to deal with an overflowing toilet. I just need to have access to support. So it really provides just a really incredible experience. It's very vibrant. We have thousands of activities a year. We do on and off site. And then we also can increase access to transportation because we run a grocery shuttle twice a week. All of the activities we provide transportation for. So some of the barriers that people with disabilities face in the transportation space, affordable housing, mental health, we can kind of touch on all those things in the setting, and people can choose how much they want to engage in. There's people who live there who are, introverts, kind of loners, like many of us. They don't want to hang out, and they don't do anything. And then there's people that are at every activity, like if you're in an HOA, you have those people that do everything. There's those people at the village. So, but it really is just an incredible asset, and it's a fun place to be. You can't not have a good time if you're there. There's karaoke, I think, every Thursday, and bingo on Tuesday. And if you're there those nights, it is rocking. Yes, it is rocking. Lacey and I had a meeting there a couple of months ago, and in the middle of the meeting, they start karaoke, and it's so fun. You can't not have a good time. And it's like the best place to karaoke because no one cares anything about your talent. It's just great. So you can't say enough about it. We have lots of opportunities for people to see it through volunteerism, through events, things like that. But we want it to be an asset to the community.
So is this an individual apartment complex? Okay.
It's duplexes and triplexes. So it's off of Hodges near Beach, and it's a great location because it's walkable to all of the things. But if you pulled into it, it just feels like a really nice neighborhood. So I mentioned duplexes and triplexes. They all have kind of a different look to them, so it feels very neighborhoodish. But it's great. And that's actually also, we have some adjacent land there where we just opened our first mental health community home that's meant for people who also want to live independently. So we do other programs kind of around that space, but that's really, I think, the village is, where people started to hear the Arc Jacksonville's name locally a whole lot more. And I don't know that it was decades of work that I know board members and everyone went into to secure the land, to secure the tax credits, to do all that went in. I mean, it was a heavy lift. And at the time, it had never been done. So no one knew if we could even fill it up. And now we laugh thinking about that now because it is, as I mentioned, the wait list is just extensive. And I get calls all the time. I mean, people want their child there. And I want to say around a third of the residents are from out of the area, even, where people have just tried to come because it's a unique offering you can't find anywhere else.
And when we talk about individuals with differences, a huge issue can be isolation and loneliness. And if you're living in the community in a typical apartment complex, what's missing for a lot of individuals with IDD is that connection to the community. And so even if they're employed, they might find themselves going to work during the day, going back to their apartment, and then being isolated, especially if they don't drive, if they don't have transportation. And so the village, in the center of all of the apartment buildings, is the community center, which is really the hub of the village. And it has everything your standard apartment complex might have, like a pool and a fitness center. But we also have activity rooms. We have a theater. We have just areas where the individuals can gather to spend time together. We have a cafe that's open in the mornings where they can come get a coffee and a bagel and talk to their friends and engage with volunteers and with families and visitors. And so it really promotes that sense of community. And like Kari was saying, we have thousands of activities. There's activities happening every single day that that the residents can sign up for. And they can go out into the community to events. We can bring volunteers to the village to connect with the residents. And so it really provides this community that helps to fight against that isolation that a lot of people with IDD feel. I think that's one of my favorite parts of the village, is just walking in or driving in, and you can see everyone's, walking to Target together. You can see them hanging out by the pool together. They're spending every single day with their friends and their family and our staff and volunteers. And it's really adding a lot to their life. It's creating a very meaningful life for all of the residents.
This is truly special, this part right here. And it just makes me go into this one question, which is, if you have a waiting list and you already know what it takes to get something like this off the ground, what would it take to expand these efforts and to create another complex where you can bring more people in, or maybe ease the overflow a little bit?
I think phase one of that, because we could build, 40 more units tomorrow, and I wouldn't be surprised if we just ended up, with the next wait list. So I think that's where we're going to start. I think we've got to expand, and that's kind of part of our planning process right now that we're in. We kind of look at 3-year outlooks, and we're starting to look at 26 through 28 right now. And so expansion is certainly on the table, and I think we'll see some movement in that area. It takes fundraising. It takes, even with tax credits. So the whole idea is that it is set up as low-income housing, but again, if you went there, you would not think of it as the traditional low-income housing. So we keep rents very low. They're limited because of how it is set up in low-income housing. So we can only charge so much. Rents range from, I want to say, like $400 to $900, depending on someone's income. But to do that, it takes a lot of resources going in. So we go after a lot of different state and federal funding, but on top of that, there's always a local match. So funding is obviously what it all boils down to, but we know what it takes to kind of put that together. And we know the community sees the value, and we believe 100% we can get that support from our community to kind of go to the next.
Yeah, I think you already have a case study that would suffice with anybody that wants to know if their dollar is going to go to good use. I think the answer is clearly yes on that. Out of curiosity, for those who are ignorant, i.e. me, what's the qualification process look like? I'm sure people put in for applications for this, but what qualifies them to have access to the village?
So we're looking at, obviously, people who really want, first and foremost, there's people out there. I have a friend who has an intellectual disability who lives alone, and he would be miserable at the village. He's not social, doesn't want to be around people, whatever. So first and foremost, obviously, we want people first with a disability that kind of want to be there. The disability can be one that we typically serve that you see, Down syndrome, autism, intellectual disability. It can be a traumatic brain injury. If someone had maybe a more acquired disability, but they fit and they need that same level of support, that's the first thing we look at. Then it is based on, because of the way we funded the property through tax credits, I mentioned the low income part of it, you have to qualify eligibility wise for your income. So it's income based, but it's only based on the individual's income. It's not based on their parents, their families, whatever other support. So the majority of the people we support are not working so many hours or at such a high level that they don't qualify. So it's rare that we run into an issue with the income level, but that is something to be aware of. And the other thing is that we require everyone who lives there to have some type of support. That can be through us, through another provider. There's a whole variety of things. We have just found that without some supports, the likelihood of someone succeeding is much less. And obviously we want people to be, the whole point is stable housing, stable life. So we provide supports to about half the people that live there, and the other half get supports from other people, other providers. It doesn't really matter to us as much as we just want people to have whatever level of support they need to be successful.
Okay. That's going to be great for people to come to see, like, okay, am I eligible to at least reach out? And I guess if anybody's questioning if they're eligible or not, it would probably do them a lot of favors to go ahead and reach out and contact you guys first. Yeah. Okay.
Pretty detailed once you get further in the process. They do a really detailed kind of assessment of what you need help with, what you don't need help with. And it doesn't necessarily preclude anyone from living there, but it gives us an idea of what's it going to take from wraparound services to ensure this person's successful. And can we be sure that those things are in place through us, through other people? So, I mean, they get into a lot of detailed questions. We just ask people to be super honest about it, because we don't necessarily hold that against people, but it really helps us set the person up from the beginning correctly.
Makes sense. Before I move on, I want to go right back to the college program. Lacey, I'll refer back to you on this. What does that process look like for somebody who's interested? You know, somebody's going through high school. Maybe it is an intellectual disability. Maybe it's a traumatic brain injury. But whenever they're looking at the school application process and what they're afforded by doing so, what does that look like? How do they get involved?
Yeah, so it's a similar process to the Village, where we have an application and we really ask for a lot of different information about the individual's behaviors, their skill sets, what they're looking to gain out of the experience. Like Kari was saying, we really want people who want to be involved in that, and that's really the direction that they're looking to go. They are living on campus. They're living with 3 other people in a dorm room. They're expected to be able to navigate around campus. So there is a certain level that we're looking for those students. But it's just the standard application process. They'll do interviews and they'll connect with the parents and make sure that it's a good fit going forward. For some people, that college experience is not necessarily what they're looking for. They want to go more directly into a career, or maybe they're looking to just, move to independent living and employment. So the individuals we serve have a lot of different goals, and just like all of us. So sometimes we have young adults where we'll direct them to a different program that we think might be a better fit. We have a lot of different transition aged programs for students who are making that jump from the public school system to what does adulthood look like. So really it's asking them, what do you want to be next for your life, for your 20s? So we have another college program called Career Campus, which is in partnership with Florida State College at Jacksonville. So that's another great option for students who are in that age range. That program is much more focused on vocational training, work readiness, and then getting them set up on a career path of their choosing to have successful employment after that program ends. So we really have a wide range of options. So we like to kind of sit down with families and parents and figure out what their goals are, what they want for their loved one, and then we can point them in the right direction of what program might be a good fit.
This is really good stuff. I mean, you guys are doing amazing work. What about the lodge? Talk to me about that.
We opened the lodge just over a year ago, and it serves 6 individuals who have both an intellectual difference and a mental health diagnosis, but their goal is still to live independently. So it's not necessarily crisis stabilization when you think of mental health, but it's more people that what we've learned over time. So a third of people with an intellectual disability also have a mental health diagnosis. And oftentimes the person, no matter what symptoms they had, whether it was anxiety, depression, everything was just attributed to their disability. And they did not necessarily get the same care that, I might receive if I had some of the same symptoms. So keeping that in mind, we start to realize through the Village that there's people that were struggling to live independently, and it wasn't because of their disability, it was because of their mental health diagnosis, a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, and other types of mental health things too. So the thought was, how can we set up a home that helps someone with maybe more intensive supports learn the skills to cope with some of those things? And so that is kind of how the lodge was born. And again, it kind of came, oftentimes most of our ideas come out of really the brains of parents just coming to us and saying, this is what I'm seeing. They can maintain their apartment. They have, good hygiene, good cleanliness, but they are so stressed and, don't know how to sometimes cope with just being alone for periods of time, or the thought of walking out of their apartment to go do something that they're totally capable of doing is just an overwhelming feeling to them. So the lodge started, so 6 people live there. It's a really cool setup because everyone has their own apartment, but they open interiorly to a really nice kitchen and dining room and living room. And we have staff on site, awake staff 24/7, who can help with medication, make sure people are complying with their medication. They also have I want to say 4 or 5 days a week, they have mental health supports that come into the home. So really helping them in their setting gain those skills. So let's say for that example, someone does struggle, with appropriate socialization or initiating socialization. They can then work on that in the setting with the individual. And the individuals that live there still work. They might attend, a day program, do some sort of volunteerism. They do a wide variety of things, but they get that mental health support when they get home to kind of cope or plan for what's next. So just a little more intensive. It's not short term, it is permanent housing, but the idea of the program is that someone gains the skills to move to the next level, whether that be the village, an apartment down the street, whatever their personal goal is. They just gain those skills. And then maybe it may take a few years, it may take 5 years. There's no time limit on how long they can stay there. But certainly most of the people that are expressing an interest in that setting, their goal is still to live totally alone. They just need more help to get going in that direction.
And the lodge is a great option for people who are coming from, living in a family home and have the skill set to live independently, but they don't have those coping skills to jump straight into something like the village. When we opened the lodge, I had a parent of one of the residents come and share how in their previous living situation, their child was staying in their room, and they had really, they weren't taking the steps to go out and socialize with people. They didn't have a connection to make friends and to spend time with friends and to learn those kinds of social skills. And so she said that a couple weeks after moving into the lodge, she was shocked when she walked up to the lodge, and she saw her child sitting on the front porch with the other lodge residents talking and playing games. And for her, she was just shocked to see that. And so to see that her child was having this community and was learning those socialization skills and getting that opportunity to kind of spread her wings and learn what it looks like to live independently. And so that's really the goal of the program, is that those individuals would get the coping skills to go along with the independent living skills to be able to be successful in whatever kind of living situation they want to end up with after the lodge.
Do you think that the social element is, in some cases, that whenever they're in the community, they feel that they're with people who are more like them? I'm once again asking completely out of ignorance, but is there like a shame element to them and now they're part of a community? Because regardless of whatever the answer is, I feel pretty bad that they feel that way to begin with.
So I love that question because I think it's a very accurate question. And it really depends on the person, but I kind of had this realization just a few months ago. I heard the UNF president was talking about UNF, and he said, the great thing about UNF is you can come here and find anyone who looks like you. And he was telling the story, not anything to do with disabilities. He was saying, people feel welcomed and like they belong because they can find people to connect to. And I was like, that's what we constantly try to say about the village is we want people to have friends with and without disabilities. We want people to be in their community. But for all of us, we're generally going to engage more when we find people like us. Like that is just human nature. That doesn't mean we shouldn't push those boundaries and, go like be with people and learn from people who aren't like us. But there is certainly a comfort level. I always say, like, I live in a neighborhood where there's other families with young kids because I want my kids to have people to play with. And so I end up choosing a place that has people in a very similar place in life than I do. And I think that's what's so important about these settings. It's not that at all we want people to only hang out with each other, but we want them to feel like they have that connection. And there's something about that. You have someone to walk to Target with. You have someone, to go to TPC with. We had a group at TPC last week. And that's what we all do. We all go with our friends, and so you're dead on. And sometimes it's hard to articulate because like you said, I feel bad about it. And I don't know that you should feel bad or anyone should feel bad. I think that we have to realize that that's oftentimes like our closest connections end up being people we meet through college who are in similar majors than us. That is just the way human nature works. And so we kind of have realized we need to provide those opportunities for people with disabilities so that they have their friends. And certainly people go to church and they have tons of friends outside of it, but the connection with someone like them is an important connection.
Yeah, thank you for that. But it was a really good answer, actually. I'm glad that we're providing. I'm glad UNF's providing something for everybody. I'm glad you guys are providing a safe haven for people to kind of open up and be themselves. I know that there's other. I think Lacey, you could have said this before the call that there are a couple of programs that are newer, maybe in the past year and a half or so. I know that the lodge was newer, but is there anything else that Arc Jax is doing that should be on people's radar?
Yes, well, two we already kind of spoke about, which is the Lodge, which opened in February of last year, and then our Career Campus program in partnership with FSCJ, which launched about a year and a half ago. But we also launched in 2023 our program called Specialized Aging Support. And that program really came about because of an emerging need in the IDD community, which was the need for aging services and supports for individuals who have or are at risk of Alzheimer's disease-related dementia. And so that became a conversation that we started hearing a lot more about in the community. And statistics and data started coming out showing that by the time someone with Down syndrome reaches the age of 60, there's about a 90% chance that they will be diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease-related dementia. And especially early onset. So we're seeing individuals with Down syndrome being affected in their 30s to 40s. Which is obviously much sooner than the typical population. And so we have a board member whose story really inspired the program because his sister had Down syndrome and she lived a wonderful life. She was one of the first in the community to work a job in the community. She lived independently in the community. She was married. She was very involved, very active. And they started seeing a lot of changes that they were struggling to understand in her behavior and her independence, which eventually led to a diagnosis of Alzheimer's. And with that, they recognized that there was not a lot of support or understanding. If you're going to aging providers, typically these individuals who are experiencing this at a young age are not meeting the criteria. They're not 50 plus or 55 plus or 60 plus experiencing these changes related to aging. And so there was a big lack of support. And so we decided to try to launch this program, and we were able to secure $1 million federal grant over 3 years for this pilot program. And so we also were able to partner with Baptist Health and with the Community Foundation for Northeast Florida and receive some other additional funding that allowed us to launch this program. So today what it looks like is a day center called the Kimberly Smoke Palmer Day Center, which is named after our board member's daughter. And it's open 5 days a week. And so we have participants both with Alzheimer's and at risk of Alzheimer's who come and are able to participate in activities that are really meant to delay the onset of symptoms and to provide cognitive stimulation and fitness and nutrition and the things that will really help them to lead a healthy life for as long as possible. And then a big part is also providing support to the caregivers because we know, I think if you talk to anyone who has a loved one who's experienced Alzheimer's and dementia, that it's just as hard on the caregiver as it is on the individual who's experiencing it. So we do caregiver support groups. We're providing in-home occupational therapy assessments to caregivers to help them determine what they can change about the living environment to make it safer for the individual. And then one of my favorite pieces of the program is really providing training and support to the greater community on what Alzheimer's and dementia looks like in individuals with IDD, because we recognize that a huge obstacle for families is just simply getting the diagnosis, because oftentimes changes in behavior can be attributed to the difference and not necessarily to the Alzheimer's, because medical professionals don't have as much awareness around the early onset dementia and the connection between IDD and dementia. So the staff there has done a really wonderful job at connecting with community partners and helping to train them on the signs and symptoms to look for and better diagnostic tools, because you can't diagnose Alzheimer's in someone with IDD the same way that you might do it with the general population. I think we've trained over 650 people in the community at this point on IDD and dementia basics, which is one of the most exciting parts of the program for me, because that means that there's 650 people in Jacksonville now that are trained to look out for and to hopefully provide support sooner to families and better support for families so that they feel like they are really supported through the process.
It's pretty damn amazing. You touched on something you talked about people who are related to or know somebody in their life that has Alzheimer's or dementia. My grandfather has dementia. And you were talking about it being frustrating and difficult. I love the man. I will always love the man. But every time I talk to him now, I pretty much get asked the same 3 questions on a loop. The answers don't change, but he can't remember 30 seconds ago. There's certain things he can remember from like 50 years ago. But yeah, he'll be like, what do you do for work? And mind you, I've been doing the same thing for work for a very long time, but I have to answer that question over and over again. And so one of the things that I was taught was just meet them where they are. So I whenever I get on the call, I just I answer the questions as best I can with the same enthusiasm, and just, I don't know, not make it a more difficult situation than it already is. So the fact that you're providing that support, well, it means something to me, but I'm sure it means something to the 650 people, plus the ones that you'll continue to support moving forward. That's wonderful.
That's a really good point. And we teach that all the time to families and our own staff, like, kind of go to the person's reality. Don't push back on if, they think they're in a moment that they're not in. It's human nature to be like, oh no, that happened a long time ago, or oh no, that person died, or oh, whatever. It could be anything. But it doesn't always come as natural. It's just not our natural reaction. So even we have our own staff is now more extensively trained. So we have one of our community homes that specifically has additional training, and it has all of the residents there have a dementia diagnosis. So they went through specialized training just to be able to manage those behaviors. We're not actually trying to teach the person to do anything different. We're really trying to ensure that our reactions, and that's true for all dementia as you've described, but it's not necessarily an inherent response. So it is something we have to teach.
Yeah. It's been a learning experience. I'm sure I could have benefited from a little bit of training in advance, but it is what it is. I love what you guys are doing. Obviously, we get the college program, the village, the lodge. We've got specialized aging support. I'm sure there's other things too. Is there anything we haven't touched on in terms of programs that might be beneficial for the public to know about?
So I always love talking about employment for people with differences. We have people employed in a variety of settings that can be small groups where they actually might work together as a group to accomplish some task. But then we also have a large contract where we employ around 40 people who earn at least minimum wage. And that's a unique setting because it gives people more additional support if they need mental health support. And then we have a ton of people that work in the community and fulfill, in need jobs that really help employers meet their goals. So I always want to mention employment. I think for all of us, a paycheck is important, but really this is our routine. This is why we wake up in the morning. This is where we oftentimes have some of our deepest connections with people. And in our space, especially, you get to work on a goal together. And so the value of employment is not just the paycheck. And so it is really important as we think about someone's overall well-being and health. Housing is a huge part, transportation is a huge part, and employment is a significant part of that equation. And that can be a little bit of 1 day a week to 5 days a week, depending on the person's interest. The one other thing I do want to mention is our family support department, because I always want people to know we have a very small but impactful team of people that help families throughout a lifetime deal with whatever their next phase is. So there's a lot of changes that happen financially, through medical insurance, things like that, as someone turns 18 and becomes an adult. Social Security, I mentioned earlier, all of that comes into play. It is not easy to navigate alone. I've worked in the space almost 10 years, and I still struggle even to understand sometimes what we're doing. But we have a team that really helps families with that. So from birth to death, basically, they're doing, they can do case management to help people, where they actually can help them fill out paperwork and do things. And then we also have a life plan that people can actually sit down, because we hear all the time from parents, even parents, who have done everything they can do. Their child lives successfully alone. They still think it's the what keeps me up at night, what's going to happen to my child when I'm gone. And that is a huge burden for, parents to not, like I heard a dad said the other day, let us die in peace kind of thing, just to know that their child is has a plan, has a life plan. So we sit down actually and go through families like, okay, who does this? Who does that? How can we make sure there's backups for this and backups for that? And just to give people the peace to know, and they can live their life and enjoy their retirement, and the person can live their best life too. But that's kind of It's part of that like long-term planning none of us like to do, but it really gives us all a lot of peace of mind. So that's unique to us. We're one of the only in Florida that really offers the combination of things. We help people with trust, guardianship, benefits I mentioned. And if someone just doesn't know where to start, I always say call the family support department, even if they're like, I think I need services, because they're going to say, okay, what's your funding stream? What's this? What's that? It's complex and very difficult to navigate. And everyone's situation is unique. So people getting advice from friends and stuff is sometimes very helpful, but can also sometimes lead you down maybe the wrong path, because if your diagnosis is different, that might change even the documentation you need to submit to some of these agencies.
So the family support area, that would be like home base. People can call
Yes.
there and kind of get branched out and get direction on what they really need. Okay.
Yeah, because most of the time I don't think, people don't even know what they don't even know what to ask for. So expecting people to call and say, hey, I need help with this. It may be, I need help because my child's graduating from high school. I still have to go to work. What am I going to do? So they kind of do need a day program, or the person needs employment, but they also need funding for that. And they also need to be sure the person's Medicaid gets, correctly enrolled. So it's really a good place to start, because people don't necessarily even know what they don't know. And that's fine. We don't expect them to. That team is trained to kind of layer in what they need.
So speaking of funding, the breakdown, obviously you guys you have Medicaid, and then in one area you got a federal grant. Percentage wise, how much of this is state funding versus like fundraising?
So probably around 20% of our overall budget is fundraising, and that includes grants, things like that, individual donors. The other 80% is a mix. I'd say around 60% is Medicaid. So when someone has an intellectual disability, we say Medicaid, but it's actually called the Medicaid Waiver Program. And it's because people are waiving their right to be in an institution, but that funds their home and community-based services. The funding is through Medicaid, but it's not what you typically think of as medical services. It's funding residential support, employment support, day support, companion, transportation. It funds all sorts of things, but it is through the Medicaid bucket. But it's a separate eligibility, separate program. About 60% of our funding runs through that funding stream. That's how the majority of people are funded. So that flows through the state. It is a state-federal match, but it's heavily state directed. Not to say, obviously, federal changes to Medicaid would impact it, but we generally are more focused at the state level on kind of making our priorities known, because the state has a ton of discretion in how they administer those funds. So that's kind of the breakdown. The other 20%, so 60 is Medicaid, 20% is fundraising, the other 20% is more private pay, a different sort of funding stream. We generally focus more at the state level. We do have to obviously pay attention to what's going on at the federal level, but right now there's a lot of disability advocates at the state level. So it's really been, incredible to see the support. People who are sitting in the legislature that have siblings. And so they're passionate about getting people services who need them. And they hear families. I mean, I've heard time and time again from both on the Senate and the House side, people saying, I have these families coming to me, they're desperate. Their child might have significant disabilities and they need help, and it's not a good situation. And they have heard those requests loud and clear and have made it known. Just in the last few weeks, there's people on record, saying this is a population we know is so deserving, and we want to take care of. So we feel pretty positive about the support we're getting at the state level, and just the priority that people with disabilities are kind of taking right now.
Does the state of Florida do a better job with nonprofits than other states, or is it a pretty standard effort across the board?
So there is a lot of, I can only really speak to the disability side. I mean, there's a lot of variation state to state and how the Medicaid waiver funds are administered. What I really like about Florida is the flexibility that we have. The village, for example, is not allowed in every single state because it's all people with disabilities living together. So Florida has had a lot of flexibility and I think been very open to how we spend funding. It's not that they there's other states that are, I guess, more generous to their disability services. But so it's not to say that we're, the best of the best, but I think the flexibility helps a lot because it's helped us pursue other funding streams and really diversify what we do. And I think the state's done well as far as the people who are receiving services, making sure that, they get what they need. And there's always work to be done. 20,000 people in Florida that are on a wait list for state-funded services, but those numbers are pretty similar in all states. And there's really more people behind them that just haven't even signed up yet. That we're not unique in having a long wait list. I would say right now, the reason I'm optimistic is because we are unique in that our legislature's talking about it pretty frequently. How do we get these people services? This is, a population that certainly needs services and they want to fund it, and they prioritized it in recent years. There was more funding went to the wait list last year than in a long time. And there's talks about that. And so families in Jacksonville alone, I think there's several thousand families sitting on the wait list. And I feel pretty optimistic they're going to get supports, sooner rather than later.
Question that came to mind is, what if somebody comes to you guys and they don't have access to any funding? What if they're, they don't have employment? Maybe they didn't, maybe parents passed away and they didn't have an inheritance, or whatever the case may be. I mean, is there still a place for them with Arc Jacksonville, or is that like a little bit of a red tape situation?
I mean, it's a windy path, but yes, especially if someone ends up in a crisis, in particular, a parent passes away, there's no plan, there is a way to get them the ongoing support they're going to need outside of meeting their immediate need, which we know, our partners, we know how to meet the immediate needs, but we generally are still really focused on the long-term plan. But in those situations, that's where our family support team, they know how to complete crisis applications and things that expedite things. And then there's there's lots of different buckets depending on what someone needs. So yes, it's not all totally funding dependent, but we are always going to be looking at the long-term play. So even if we can help someone get a job today and that really meets their immediate need, we're still going to be thinking, okay, what's going to happen when this person ages? What's going to happen? And trying to because some of those things do take a long time. So that's always our approach, is to take a more comprehensive approach, even if we kind of have a quick fix for the immediate need.
Okay, wonderful. Lacey, did we miss anything on the program front?
No, I think, like Kari was saying, we really just want families to know that we're here, and that we have staff members who are here to help them apply for benefits and to navigate our services and supports and to get them in the best fit for their loved one. And so don't hesitate to reach out. Our website is arcjacksonville.org. You can find a wealth of information on there and ways to get connected to any of the programs that we talked about today.
Okay. What else can we do? Randall Thomas, City of Jacksonville, anybody that's listening, how can we help? How can we get involved?
So my answer is always, I think, just to be a welcoming, and we are, like, Jacksonville is a very welcoming city, and also to not hesitate to connect with families that you might see needing help. We know there's a lot of people out there that need help that aren't connected, but just in, including people, whether it be in social events and church events, that goes a long way. And then knowing that we're here as you meet people who might have needs or be living with a lot of stress that we could potentially help with, just to really spread the word about what we do. We love volunteer groups for that reason, because I can tell you, oh my gosh, you can have the best experience, interacting with someone with an IDD, but it's not until you actually come and, you get to know someone and you get to see kind of who someone is and how unique and all the value they bring and how, they brighten your day. It's really hard to explain that. So we always invite people from the greater community, and we do groups, we do individual volunteering, we do all sorts of things. But that's really important to us. Really, we obviously want people to have the opportunity to thrive, but we also want the community to be a place where everyone belongs.
For those who want to volunteer and or donate and or just want to be of service in some capacity, what's the best step or action item for them?
Volunteer. Our website, arcjacksonville.org/volunteer. We have applications on there and descriptions of all the different ways that you can get involved as a volunteer. At the Village, at our Achievement and Enrichment Center. There's just a variety of different locations throughout the city that we welcome volunteers. So you can fill out an application, submit it online. Or, I welcome anyone to reach out to me if you'd like to come and do a tour of the Village or a tour of any of our facilities and just find out more about what we do. We always invite that. So I'd say just don't hesitate to reach out to our team and figure out the best fit for you to get involved in our mission.
Thank you. Any last minute things that we didn't cover that we'd like to make sure that the people are aware of?
Okay. The opportunity to kind of talk about this population. It really, they're sometimes one of the more unseen populations, I think. And so I really appreciate the chance just to share more about how incredible some of the individuals are, and also the great work that's being done by people in Jacksonville. And like Lacey said, pioneers that come long before us, but has truly made Jacksonville an incredible place. If someone is born tomorrow with an IDD in Jacksonville, our family supports team can look at them and say you have a lot of resources, and that's because of years and years of people really pouring into this special population.
Yeah, I think you guys are doing amazing work. It's very rare that I do one of these and my notebook looks like graffiti. but you guys are doing incredible work. And so, at least on the show and on air, I want to make sure that this is recorded, on behalf of Jacksonville and the people that live in Jacksonville. I just want to thank you for what you do, and for the impact you make, and clearly making this a better place to live. I mean that sincerely. I'm excited to get all this in the show notes, so people have a better understanding. And obviously we'll post a full episode and then smaller clips, so we can continue to get eyeballs on what you're doing. And I anticipate some kind of expansion efforts on your part. You've been in business, or not in business, but you've been doing what you've been doing for 60 years. It's evolved over the 60. I'm sure it's going to evolve moving forward. So whatever I can do to help, please say the word. I'm happy to do it. But super thrilled you guys were here today, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.